The Grand Assembly Hall of the Stellar Concordat had witnessed first contact with 473 species over the past 6 millennia. Ambassador Quilvan took tremendous pride in this fact as he adjusted his ceremonial antennae, each one perfectly aligned according to the ancient protocols. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's soft luminescence, polished to mirror perfection for this routine session. Another glorious day of measured discourse, Quilvan chittered to himself, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. At the chamber's apex, High Arbiter Morgoth hovered in perpetual stillness. The ancient crystalline being had not moved noticeably in 3,000 years, maintaining absolute composure as befitted the Concordat's supreme authority. Lesser species often wondered if Morgoth was even alive, but Quilvan knew better. Those prismatic facets saw everything, judged everything, and never once showed a flicker of surprise. The morning agenda was blessedly mundane: trade route adjustments, mining rights arbitration, the usual territorial squabbles between the Velka and HFY systems. Quilvan was reviewing his notes when the chamber's alert system activated. Not the gentle chime of scheduled arrivals, but a shrieking klaxon that hadn't sounded in Quilvan's lifetime. Unscheduled spatial distortion detected, announced the chamber's artificial intelligence, its normally serene voice edged with something approaching confusion. Classification: unknown. Scale: extreme. Location: directly above the assembly. Every diplomat in the chamber looked up. Through the transparent dome, space itself appeared to be vomiting. There was no better word for it. Reality twisted, buckled, and spat out something enormous. The vessel that materialized was easily the size of a small moon, all brutal angles and industrial plating. But what captured everyone's attention was the fact that significant portions of the hull appeared to be held together with reflective silver adhesive strips. "Is that," Quilvan whispered, "is that tape?" The ship's exterior was a masterclass in improvisation. Scorch marks covered entire sections. What looked like blast doors had been welded at odd angles. One entire tower seemed to have been added as an afterthought, connected to the main structure by struts that made several engineers in the chamber quietly weep. Then came the music. It started as a vibration, then built into a thunderous wall of sound that somehow bled through the vacuum of space and into the chamber's communication channels. Guitars screamed. Drums pounded. A human voice howled something about a highway to hell with alarming enthusiasm. "Boris, turn that down." A different voice cut through the music channel, tinged with exhaustion. "We're broadcasting on all frequencies." "But Captain, this is the good part. I don't care if it's the second coming of Sabbath, turn it off." The music died abruptly, replaced by a chorus of very human swearing. Quilvan's antennae drooped in confusion. Above him, he could have sworn he detected the faintest shimmer in Morgoth's crystalline structure. Impossible. Morgoth never reacted to anything. The chamber's communication officer, a methodical being named Trell, initiated the first contact protocol with shaking appendages. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered Stellar Concordat sovereign space. Please identify your species, homeworld, and technological classification for diplomatic processing." Silence. Then, Mike? Mike. Someone's hailing us. "Well, answer it, you muppet." "I don't know which button does what. Everything's labeled in Russian." "That's because Boris built the comms panel." "Why would Boris label things in Russian?" "Because Boris is Russian, Priya." More shuffling sounds. The distinct noise of something falling and breaking. Someone cursing in what the translation matrix identified as Spanish, irritated variant. Then finally, a new voice, deeper and distinctly sheepish. Hello? This is Captain Marcus Henderson of the Earth Vessel Absolute Unit. We're humans. From Earth. In the Sol system. Third planet from the Sun, pretty decent oceans, kind of mucked up the atmosphere a few decades back but we're working on it." The entire council chamber sat in stunned silence. Captain Henderson continued, "we're really sorry about just dropping in like this. Our experimental jump drive kind of overshot the test parameters. By a lot. Like, a lot. Navigation says we're about 3,000 light-years from where we meant to be, which is frankly embarrassing but also pretty impressive if you think about it." Quilvan's mandibles hung open. In 6,000 years of recorded first contact, not once had a species apologized for existing in the wrong location. "Wait," Henderson's voice perked up. "Are you guys like the Space UN or something? Do you have forms we need to fill out? Please tell me you have coffee." From the chamber's apex came a sound that had never before echoed through these hallowed halls. High Arbiter Morgoth, ancient beyond reckoning, made a noise that could only be described as a crystalline whimper. This was going to be a very long day. Archon Thessalax prided himself on his unshakable composure. In his 4 centuries of service to the Stellar Concordat, he had analyzed the complete histories of 67 civilizations without so much as a raised scale. His emerald reptilian eyes had witnessed wars, plagues, and societal collapses, all documented with scholarly detachment. Today, however, as he stood in the council analysis chamber staring at the human database, his tail twitched involuntarily. "This cannot be accurate," he muttered, adjusting his spectral lenses for the 3rd time. Beside him, junior analyst Pipwick's amphibious skin had shifted from a healthy blue to a sickly gray. "Archon, I've triple-checked the translation matrices. It's all correct." His throat sac inflated with anxiety. They really did all of this. The holographic display showed humanity's ascent into space, a chemical rocket, essentially a controlled explosion, with 3 humans strapped to the top. No inertial dampeners. No gravitational compensation. Just explosive fuel and pure audacity. They sat on top of a bomb, Thessalax breathed. Their first attempt at leaving their planet involved sitting on top of a bomb and hoping for the best. "It gets worse, Archon." Pipwick pulled up another file. "They've had the capability to extinct themselves for over 2 centuries. Multiple times they nearly did. Something called the Cuban Missile Crisis, where 2 nations held world-ending weapons at each other for 13 days over political disagreement. And they survived. Barely. One individual literally refused to launch, going against protocol. They called him Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov. His species gave him a medal, then mostly forgot about him." Thessalax's claws scraped against the console. What kind of civilization forgets the person who saved them from extinction? The database continued its horrifying revelations. Humanity had created artificial intelligence, lost control of financial markets to it, then just shrugged and kept going. They had split atoms before understanding radiation. They had dumped industrial waste into their oceans for decades, then acted surprised when fish started dying. They had something called reality television, that apparently served no survival purpose whatsoever. "Archon?" Pipwick's voice was very small. "They keep apex predators in their homes. On purpose. For companionship." "What?" "Creatures called cats and dogs. Descendants of pack hunters and solitary killers. They domesticated them. The files show humans making sounds at them called baby talk, and dressing them in cloth coverings for amusement." Thessalax sat down heavily. "Request a tour of their vessel. I need to see this species in person." 3 hours later, Thessalax and Pipwick materialized aboard the Absolute unit, escorted by Sergeant Deshaun Walker, a human whose muscle mass suggested he was primarily composed of intimidation. The man smiled broadly, which the translation software unhelpfully noted was probably friendly, not a threat display. "Welcome aboard." Walker's voice boomed. "Sorry about the mess. We weren't expecting company for another 6 months." The corridor they walked through was clean but chaotic. Strange symbols covered the walls, which Walker explained were motivational posters and memes. One showed a small earth feline with text reading, "Icon has diplomatic immunity." Thessalax decided not to ask. They passed a large window revealing a massive chamber filled with equipment. "That's our gym," Walker explained proudly. "Gotta stay fit. Captain says if we're gonna represent humanity, we can't do it with noodle arms." "You dedicated ship space to physical exercise." Pipwick squeaked. "Sure. Mental health's important too. That's why we got the bar on deck 7 and the gaming lounge on deck 12. Thessalax stopped walking. "You have a recreational alcohol dispensary on a military vessel." "Military?" Walker laughed. "Nah, this is an exploration ship. Though yeah, we got weapons. You know, just in case." They entered a laboratory where Dr. Yuki Tanaka was examining samples, her hair tied back in a chaotic bun, wearing a shirt that read "Science, it works, witches." She looked up, waved casually at the aliens, and returned to her work. "Dr. Tanaka," Thessalax began carefully, "I have reviewed your species' history. The nuclear weapons, the climate disasters, the near-extinction events. How did you survive?" Tanaka shrugged without looking up. "Spite, mostly. And really good last-minute problem-solving. We're great in a crisis. It's the boring stuff we struggle with." She gestured at a display showing Earth. "See, we almost killed ourselves like 40 different times, but we're still here. Turns out being too stubborn to die is an evolutionary advantage." "That's not how evolution works," Thessalax protested weakly. Tell that to the honey badger. Before Thessalax could respond, a new human burst into the lab wearing a white coat covered in what appeared to be food stains. Chef Antonio Russo carried a tray of something that smelled aggressively aromatic. Perfetto. Dr. Tanaka, you must try the new recipe. He spotted the aliens and his face lit up. Ah. Visitors. You are hungry, yes? I make you something special. We have very specific dietary requirements, Pipwick began nervously. Everyone can eat pizza. Is universal truth. Russo thrust the tray forward. This one is margarita, very simple, very perfect. Tomato, cheese, basil. Is like edible poetry. Thessalax stared at the circular food item. You brought cooking equipment into space. Of course. What are we, animals? Russo looked genuinely offended. A ship without a proper kitchen is not a ship, is a flying sadness box. As if summoned by the mention of food, a small orange earth feline sauntered into the lab, tail held high. It looked directly at Thessalax, sat down, and began grooming itself with complete indifference to the alien presence. That's Lieutenant Whiskers, Tanaka said without looking up. Best morale officer we've got. You have a ranking system for your pets. He's earned it. Stopped 3 crew arguments this week just by being fluffy. Thessalax's tail wrapped around his own leg, a self-soothing gesture from childhood. Pipwick's skin had gone completely transparent from stress. On the tray, the pizza steamed invitingly, filling the lab with sense that the translation matrix couldn't even begin to categorize. Somewhere in the distance, the bass-heavy thump of music started again, followed by Captain Henderson's long-suffering shout of Boris. Thessalax made a decision. Junior Analyst Pipwick, please record the following official assessment. Humanity is terrifying, confusing, and somehow still alive despite their best efforts. Recommend immediate diplomatic accommodation and whatever they want. Recommend we never, ever make them angry. Pipwick nodded vigorously, his throat sac pulsing agreement. Chef Russo beamed. You try the pizza now, yes? Thessalax sighed and reached for a slice. When in the presence of beautiful chaos, one could only surrender. Supreme Coordinator Vexthor had spent the last 48 hours calculating threat assessments. His neural matrix, enhanced by centuries of tactical implants, processed data with ruthless efficiency. He stood on the Council's observation platform, watching the human vessel through layers of scanning equipment, and nothing made sense. The Absolute Unit was preparing to depart. Captain Henderson had been remarkably apologetic about the whole affair, promising to get out of everyone's hair as soon as their jump drive recharged. The Council had been only too happy to expedite this process, even offering to upgrade their navigation systems free of charge. Coordinator, his aide whispered, shouldn't we be documenting their capabilities more thoroughly? Vexthor's optical implants whirred softly. No. Let them leave peacefully. That vessel is either the greatest military asset in the galaxy or a complete accident waiting to happen. Either way, I don't want to find out while it's in our sovereign space. Aboard the Absolute Unit, Ensign Tommy Briggs was having a very bad day. The 23-year-old weapons technician had been assigned routine calibration duty, which should have been simple. Test the targeting systems, verify firing solutions, run diagnostics. Standard procedure. The problem was that Boris had rewired the weapons console last week. Okay, Tommy muttered, squinting at the Cyrillic labels. This button should activate the diagnostic mode. He pressed it carefully. Every weapons system on the ship hummed to life. Oh no. Oh no no no. Tommy's hands flew across the console, trying to reverse what he'd done. Instead, he activated the targeting protocols. Commander Okonkwo. We have a situation. Commander Rachel Okonkwo was in the middle of drinking coffee when the alert reached her. She dropped the mug, which shattered spectacularly, and sprinted toward the bridge. Her dark skin had gone ashen. Please tell me we didn't just arm weapons in front of the alien space UN. I didn't mean to. Tommy's voice cracked. The buttons are in Russian. Why are the buttons in Russian? Because Boris. Everyone stops blaming Boris. The engineer's accented voice crackled over comms. Is perfectly logical labeling system. On the observation platform, every alarm Vexthor possessed was screaming. The human vessel's weapons grid had activated. Not just small arms. Everything. Plasma cannons that dwarfed anything in the Council's arsenal emerged from concealed ports. Rail systems extended along the spine of the ship, each one capable of firing projectiles at relativistic speeds. And something else, something the sensors couldn't properly identify, began charging with enough energy to light up every detector within 1,000 kilometers. Full defensive shields. Vexthor commanded. Move all Council vessels to safe distance. Back on the Absolute Unit's bridge. Captain Henderson burst through the door still holding a sandwich. What did you do? It was an accident. Tommy wailed. How do you accidentally activate every weapon we have? The calibration sequence was supposed to be passive. Passive doesn't mean press all the buttons, Briggs. Commander Okonkwo was already at the helm, her fingers dancing across controls. Captain, the automated targeting system has locked onto a debris field approximately 20,000 kilometers from the Council platform. It's interpreting the calibration order as requiring live fire confirmation. Henderson's sandwich fell from his hands. Can we abort? Not without manually overriding each system. That'll take 20 minutes. We don't have 20 minutes. The aliens are going to think we're attacking. Through the view screen, they could see Council vessels scrambling, their shields flickering to maximum power. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication channels. Sir, Okonkwo said quietly, if we don't complete the calibration sequence, the weapon systems will think they've malfunctioned and initiate a full diagnostic, which means they'll all fire anyway to verify functionality. Henderson closed his eyes. So our options are fire now with warning, or fire later without warning. Essentially, yes sir. Okay. Henderson grabbed the communications console. Stellar Concordat, this is Captain Henderson. We are experiencing a minor technical malfunction. We are not, I repeat, not engaging in hostile action. We will be conducting a brief weapons test to resolve this malfunction. Please stand by and do not panic. On the observation platform, Vexthor's aide made a sound like escaping steam. Do not panic? Do not panic. The first railgun fired. The projectile wasn't particularly large, just a tungsten rod about 2 meters long. What made it terrifying was the speed. The rod accelerated to 0.3 light speed in less than a second, creating a visible distortion in space-time as it traveled. When it hit the debris field, matter simply ceased to exist. No explosion. No fragmentation. The debris field and everything in a 5-kilometer radius converted directly to plasma. The plasma cannons fired next, synchronized volleys that painted space in colors the sensors couldn't name. Each blast carried enough energy to vaporize an asteroid. The display showed temperature readings that shouldn't have been possible outside a stellar core. Then the main weapon charged. The mysterious system that had been drawing power finally revealed itself as a gravitational lance. It didn't fire projectiles or energy. It fired gravity itself, a concentrated beam of warped spacetime that bent reality around its path. When it intersected with a distant ice comet, the comet didn't explode. It folded inward, compressed by impossible forces into a sphere of superdense matter no larger than a marble. The entire weapons test lasted 4 to 7 seconds. Silence fell across the observation platform. Several junior members had fainted. Vexthor's tactical implants had temporarily shut down from processing overflow. Ambassador Quilven's antennae had tied themselves in knots. High Arbiter Morgoth, for the first time in recorded history, spoke aloud rather than through thought transmission. What in the name of the ancient void was that? The communication channel crackled. Captain Henderson's voice was embarrassed. Again, really sorry about that. Minor malfunction. Everything's fine now. We'll just be on our way. Vexthor found his voice. Captain Henderson, a moment please. Sure. That weapons demonstration. Is that standard armament for your exploration vessels? A pause. Define standard. Is this normal for your ships? I mean, yeah? We're pretty far from home. Had to make sure we could handle ourselves if we ran into trouble. What kind of trouble were you expecting? You know, space pirates, hostile aliens, maybe some kind of giant space monster. My grandmother wouldn't shut up about space monsters. Real disappointed those aren't actually a thing. Vexthor's aide whimpered softly. Archon Thessalax, watching from the analysis chamber, poured himself something strong and alcoholic, despite it being morning. Captain Henderson, Vexthor said carefully, the Stellar Concordat would like to offer humanity full diplomatic privileges, immediate recognition as a sovereign spacefaring civilization, and preferential trade status. Oh, that's really nice of you, but you don't have to. We insist. Absolutely insist. Also, should you require anything, any resources, any territory, any assistance whatsoever, Please don't hesitate to ask. Okay? Thanks, I guess. And Captain? Yeah? If you encounter any other civilizations, perhaps mention that you're affiliated with the Concordat? Just casually. In conversation. Henderson sounded confused but agreeable. Sure thing, buddy. The channel closed. Vexthor turned to his assembled staff, all of whom looked like they'd witnessed the end of the universe. New protocol, he announced. If any vessel matching human configuration is detected, all military forces stand down immediately. Offer them anything they want. Do not argue. Do not negotiate hard. Do not, under any circumstances, make them think we're a threat. Quilven's antennae untangled enough for him to speak. Coordinator, they said they built weapons that powerful because they were worried about space monsters. I know. Space monsters that don't exist. I know. What happens when they find out we have actual hostile species in the outer regions? Vexthor watched the Absolute Unit's engines flare as it prepared to jump. Somewhere aboard that vessel, he knew, someone was probably eating pizza while another person blasted ancient Earth music, and a small carnivorous mammal was being treated like royalty. Then, Vexthor said quietly, I suspect those hostile species are about to have a very bad time. The Absolute Unit vanished in a flash of distorted spacetime, its jump drive carrying it toward human space. In its wake, it left a council chamber full of traumatized diplomats, revised threat assessments, and one universal truth that would be taught to every spacefaring species for the next 1,000 years. Never, ever upset the humans. Not because they are malicious, but because they'll apologize sincerely while accidentally destroying your entire fleet. High Arbiter Morgoth settled back into meditative stillness, though those close enough swore they could still detect a faint tremor in the ancient being's crystalline structure. It had been a very, very long day.